we're going to be talking about the best advice nobody ever gave me on how to make your Japanese more natural. See, this is something I kind of picked up on my own. Because the thing about Japanese is it forms expressions quite differently to Indo-European languages. And the thing is that you can translate, say something, more or less literally the way you would say it in English, and people will often understand it more or less. But not always. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes it just won't make any sense in Japanese. But yeah, other times it'll be understandable, but it won't. It'll seem unnatural. It'll seem clunky and awkward and stuff. And the best way that I have learned to overcome that is to look at Japanese alongside good English translations to get a sense of how the expressions are formed, because Japanese does things differently. It has a different toolbox in terms of how the language functions, how it can form expressions and things like that. And the best way that I've found is to just look at good translations side by side with, natural native Japanese. So, and let me just tell you, one of the best sources for this that I know of, on YouTube anyway, is Dogen's comedy videos. Because he manages to do something that is not easy. The Japanese that he speaks and the English in his subtitles, first of all, it's well translated, and second of all, the jokes work in both languages, which is a rarity. That's actually, speaking as a professional translator, also specifically a professional translator of Japanese, that's hard, actually. So, first of all, just absolute respect to Dogen for pulling that off so consistently in these videos. But what you'll notice if you know Japanese, or if you know Japanese well enough to hear what he's saying, is that it is basically never a literal translation. What he says in Japanese and what he says in English are very different things that just happen to express kind of the same vibe, the meaning gets across, but it gets across differently because the languages have different toolboxes, so to speak. So we're going to just look at examples of that. This is a video, this is one of his comedy videos. I'm going to just use this for examples. I'm just going to example mine.
はい、どなたですか？
ちょっとだけいいですか?
Here we go. This is a good example, and I'm going to just write this down in words so you can see what's going on. It can be a little bit clearer. So that's and I think I probably need to make that bigger. Not just bigger, I need to indent it so it's more easily visible. I'm gonna just put a phonetic transcription here. Chotto dake. Ah, damn it. What's going on? Now, let's just examine this. Okay, sorry, can I have just a minute of your time, is an accurate translation. It does not, but it is very much not a literal translation. It is a very natural translation, though. And so let's just look at what this actually literally says. So, chotto is a little. Oh, stop switching between fucking between keyboards on me like this. So, a little. Oh, dake means only. In this context, it means only. Good is question. So, is it good for just a little? Is sort of how that translates. If we were just going to try to be grammatical about it and translate it literally, is it good for just a little? And my camera decided to be bad for just a little. So hang on, let me just fix that shit. Oh, why do you have to keep doing this, camera? I hope I don't. I hope this is something that can be fixed without buying a new camera. I really don't feel like doing that. So, one of the things that you have to get used to in Japanese is that a lot of stuff that is implied, that is explicit in English, is only implied in Japanese. And a whole lot of stuff that is implied in English often has to be said explicitly in Japanese in order to get the meaning across. So, ちょっとだけいいですか? It gets the same meaning across as can I just have a minute of your time? Now, there was a great magazine. Finland I thought that was a new chat comment, and it was in fact just the first one that was visible over my word window here. So I picked this up because the first place I started to really see this was this great magazine called Mangajin, which maybe you can get back issues on the internet someplace. It was an amazing magazine in the 1990s that was teaching Japanese through manga. And what they would do is you'd have the manga in Japanese, then you would have this word-for-word gloss explaining exactly what's going on, the way I did there with ちょっとだけいいですか? And then there would be a good idiomatic English translation. And that, when you have that, and you start to understand, it's hard at the beginning because it isn't something that has hard and fast rules where you can just look it up in a dictionary and say, okay, this is definitely the way you would do this. But so it takes a lot of getting used to. But the more you see how equivalent expressions work in Japanese versus in English, the more you can learn to do that on your own when you're speaking Japanese. And Dogen subtitles are a great way to work on that. So let's just see more examples.
はい、少々お待ちください。
Yeah, there's another example. In English, coming, which is quite correct, but instead of saying, 来てるよ, もう行くよ, or something like that to say I'm coming, that aspect is left out. And instead is はい、少々お待ちください, which is a polite way of saying just wait a second, please.
おはようございます。
おはようございます。
なんですか?
Like, can I help you? In English, but in Japanese it's 何ですか, which means like, what is it? But politely.
ここの近所を回っていて皆さんに聞いていますが、日本語を勉強している人たちはみんなアクセントがひどいのはなぜだと思いますか?
Okay. Now, one of the things that you'll notice, let me just, actually, I'm going to write this one down because this is
おはようご
long.
ざいます。
なんですか?
ここの近所を回っていて皆さんに聞いていますが、
ここの近所を回っていて、God damn it. My keyboard is acting annoying too.
.日本語を勉強している人たちは
と 人たちは、
みんなアクセントがひどいのは、
みんな、アクセントがひどいのは、
なぜだと思いますか？
なぜだと思いますか？ So, and now, yes, I've been. Okay, did I put annual? Because annual is important too. That. Okay. Now, we're gonna just go word for word through this. So, throat clearer. Okay. So we have annual, which is like kind of a polite throat clearer. If you want to start to say something and you just kind of want to get ready to say it, and my fucking camera has done it again. Then the most polite way to say annual. Another way that people say, but is less polite, is eto sa. Is like but annual is a somewhat more formal So, 日本語を勉強している人たちは、So, okay, so what we've got here, the sentence is, ここの近所を回っていて、皆さんに聞いていますが、日本語を勉強している人たちは、みんなアクセントがひどいのは、なぜだと思いますか？ So, literally, this is like, that the accent of people studying Japanese is horrible. Horrible. That is what it literally means. Like, I'm going around the neighborhood here asking everyone, but see that ga is a complicated thing. It's a complicated affair because you first learn it. I mean, outside of its role as a subject particle, as sort of as but it isn't really but. It's a way of connecting two things without necessarily making any statement about how they're related. Just like there's a bit coming after this is kind of the way that works. And uh, a more informal way of doing the same thing is kedo, dakedo. You know, if I were being informal, you could say 日本語ここの近所回ってて皆さんに聞いてるけど and you'd say the same thing, but it was more informal. Now, this next part, So notice in the English translation, which is also, this is an accurate translation. As a translator, if I were handed this to edit, I would say this is fine. In English, it's and asking the residents. I mean, technically, Kinjo isn't really town. It's more neighborhood. I mean, that's a thing, but okay. In English you notice you say the residents, but in Japanese you wouldn't so much say that. You want to be polite, and the polite way of referring to the group of people you are addressing yourself to is either minasan, or if you want to be super polite, then it's minasama. So you just say minasan ni kiite imasu ga. So that's okay.
ていて、皆さんに聞いていますが、日本語を勉強している人たちは、みんなアクセントがひどいのはなぜだと思いますか？
And so this again, not literal, but not wrong. It is, I would say, roughly, I would call it an acceptable translation, because you notice, have you ever wondered why so many people studying Japanese have bad pronunciation? Now, you could say, for example, okay, that 発音のひどい、発音のひどい日本語、okay, let me see. 日本語を勉強している人たちの中に、発音が悪いのは、そんなに多いのはなぜなのか、なぜなんだろう、なのかなと思ったことはありますか? And that would be, I mean, that would be a more literal way of saying this in Japanese. But it's it's clunky as hell. And fundamentally what we are doing is introducing the topic, so what you're doing here is introducing the topic of people studying Japanese and their pronunciation, and the idea is that we're starting from the premise that the pronunciation is bad. Accento ga hidoi in the Japanese, as it is said here. Okay, so you're setting up this premise and inviting somebody to opine, or asking if this is a thing that they care about. And the way it's done in Japanese is to say, well, why do you think this is? And it's never a flattering freeze frame either. When I freeze frame videos, I think I like to think that I'm pretty flattering about it. When this camera freeze frames itself, it's not flattering.
いや、あんまり考えたことないですね。
でもこの現象についてどう思いますか？
Yeah, like in Japanese here, it's actually more direct. Instead of, do you mind telling your thoughts? It's like,この現象について, in relation to this phenomenon, 現象。
やったことないですね。
でもこの現象についてどう思いますか？
So what do you think about this phenomenon? And 現象, and its equivalent in Korean, hello no nok. Yeah, that hand gesture too. Yeah, its Korean equivalent, hyonsang, is used way more than the English equivalent. Like, when we talk about a phenomenon, it's really something remarkable. It's something paranormal. It's UFOs. It's fucking, astral projection, weird ass History Channel, ancient aliens bullshit. When you talk about a phenomenon, or you say somebody is a phenomenon, it means they're really, really good at something. In Japanese and in Korean, gensho, hyonsang, it's just like, it's a thing that happens. Not necessarily a thing that is particularly weird or, remarkable. Just a thing. It's just a thing that happens. Um, there's a North Korean series of comedy shorts that are sort of morality plays, called Tomaku. And they are about basically somebody does something they shouldn't do, doesn't do something they should do. It generally, sometimes it's illegal, sometimes it's just cringe. But the tagline of the show is 이런 현상을 없앱시다. 이런 현상, 건나겐쇼. This sort of phenomenon, 없앱시다, to make it not be. So let's stop this sort of thing happening. But the things that they're showing, it's not stuff that we would really describe as phenomena unless we were like in a fucking philosophy lecture or something like that. But in Japanese and in Korean, hyonsang is just sort of a general word that people just use for a thing that happens.
Soんなにひどいと思わないんですけどね。
Okay. Now, this is another one I'm going to just be sort of quasi-diagramming.
思いますか？
そんなにひどいと思わないんですけどね。
Okay, because this is a good example. The way it's said in Japanese and the way it says in English, the excellent translation, no notes, but it's definitely not literal. So, そんなにひどいとは思わないんですけどね. So, what we've got here, and I'm gonna phonetically transcribe it. Keyboard, stop doing this. ひどいとは思わないんですけど. Fuck off. Word just turned everything into Greek. Okay, this is bullshit. I thought I fixed this setting. There's this automatically detect language and switch it feature in Word. And I thought I turned it off because it does this a lot. Yes, I'm short-circuiting it by typing it in WordPad. So, literally, this is like, I don't think it's that horrible, but it's that ですけどね. Remember I was talking about my camera just did it again. Fuck you, camera. Why do you have to do this to me? I'm trying to record here, and this is not making my life easier, camera. Your job is to actually make this the video thing work, camera. Not fuck it up. So I mean, admittedly, I am sorry for dropping you repeatedly and kind of fucking up your USB cable a few times. But could you please work with me here, camera? Okay, so literally it's just, I don't think it's that horrible, but. And that but is just sort of a polite way of sort of inviting somebody to disagree. It's like you're not making, if you were to say, you could say, そんなにひどいとは思わないんです. And it's very final, you know, it's very, this is what I think. Whereas you had that けどね, which you will hear a lot, or がね, if you want to be somewhat more formal. Yeah, it's a way of it's a way of kind of inviting somebody to express their own views on the subject. It's just kind of a nice, polite way of doing that is a thing that is just done in Japanese that we don't really do in English in the same way.
あ、でもそれは知識がないからなんですよ。
Yeah. And this literally means yes, but that is because this is because there is no knowledge. Again, it's implied that it's you who lack the knowledge. 知識がない just means there is no knowledge, that knowledge doesn't exist. It does not specifically say who, it's just understood.
知識がないとそう思っちゃうんですよ。
Okay, that is that is such a good example. And I know that the fucking word is going to give me problems, so I'm gonna do this. This is a great endorsement of their product, incidentally, that I'm having to use Notepad to ensure that this does not get completely fucked up.
ないからなんですよ。知識がないとそう思っちゃうんですよ。
知識がない。Okay. Really great endorsement of where that I have to do this to avoid this stuff turning into Greek letters for no reason. Okay. 知識がないとそう思っちゃうんですよ. Now, the way this is translated in English is it's natural to think that way when you lack the proper knowledge. Now, it's natural to think that way, that's nowhere in the Japanese. You would think. I mean, like, literally you see, 知識がないと don't have the knowledge. そう思っちゃうんです. This is like, カメラの野郎。ちゃんと機能しろよ、こら Fucking camera. Omotto is a colloquial abbreviation of omotte shimau. Te shimau can be used in a lot of ways. One way, it indicates that something is either final or unfortunate, or final and unfortunate. And it can often suggest that this is just sort of like a trap you fall into. Like, so, you know, 知識がないとそう思うようになるんですよ. You could also say, if you lack the knowledge, things can be such that you would think that way. Or, 知識がないとそう思うんですよ. Or something like that, you could also say. But when you add そう思っちゃうんです, what that's saying is this is a thing that just kind of happens. It's a trap you fall into. You're falling into the trap of thinking that way. Like, I look like I'm ripping somebody's heart out there. It's fucking freeze frame. So, I mean, again, these are, you could look at this and if you look at this, you say, and you look at the Japanese, you say, well, okay, where the hell is this? It's natural to think that way. or the proper knowledge. And I mean, again, in Japanese, you imply a lot of things. You wouldn't say, ちゃんとした. I mean, it would actually sound more insulting if you added a literal word for proper. It's already condescending as hell, of course. It's natural to think that way when you lack the proper. It's condescending, but it isn't like outright say, it isn't as insulting as it could be if you said like ちゃんとした知識がないと. ちゃんとした, proper knowledge. Then it really sounds like you're just calling them thick. So mucho. I mean, and this thing, that's a really good way of translating it in both directions, because that teshimo, the way that, that is the way it works. But you have to understand, it's all about understanding the usage, and this is what you get when you're looking at a good translation into English of colloquial Japanese. You start to understand, because you start to understand the usage better. Because this is not something you can pick up in a dictionary. This isn't something you would pick up in a textbook either. Not like specifically a textbook that teaches you the meanings of Japanese phrases. This is something that you pick up by looking at good translations, or just beginning to understand the usage. That this suomochon indicates it's a natural trap that you just kind of fall into.
だから、皆さんを救いたくて、ここに来ました。
Yeah, so, yeah, literally this is, wanting to help everyone, I came here. 皆さんを救いたくて, well, actually, rescue. I mean, literally, 救 is rescue. 救いたくて. I'm wanting to rescue you. I've come here.
すいません。誰でしたっけ？
And now, what did you say your name was is nowhere in there, except that it is, because of that ke at the end. You use that is a particle that is specifically used to say, okay, this is a thing that I know I'm supposed to know, and I must have forgotten it. 誰でしたっけ? Like, who are you again?
アクセント教の道元と言いますが、
そうなんですか。Okay,
Okay, and see, that's a good example of, in both cases, it's a made-up thing. There is no Church of Accent in IPA. IPA as in International Phonetic Alphabet, not as in India Pale Ale. But in Japanese, it's Accentokyo, because there is, the way cults name themselves in Japanese is usually it's just a couple of syllables, then kyo. Kyo with the character for osieru, teaching. So teaching, is the word that is also used to mean religion. So, like Om Shinrikyo, for example. But so in Japanese, the natural way of referring to a cult would be like accentokyo, this sort of accent, kyo, religion, accent religion. But that doesn't say, you wouldn't say that in English. It wouldn't sound natural in English, because in English we have longer names for these things. So the Church of Accent in IPA. I mean, this is the sort of thing that you basically only pick up when you are looking at what in Japanese is called taiyaku, which is to say the translation next to the original. And if it's a good translation.
いますが、
そうなんですか。Okay, well, I see where this is going. Yeah, I'm not really into the whole pitch accent thing anymore, really.
でも聞いたことありますよね。
But you've heard is all that literally means. But it's understood what you've heard. And see, that's the thing. This is one of those things when you're trying to make your Japanese more natural, you gotta learn what can you leave out and people understand it, and what's going to be clunky if you add it, even though, in English you would absolutely have to leave it in, or it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, when I was young, my mum was just like really big into it, so I kind of grew up in it, but I think I just kind of grew out of it, like most of my friends did as well.
ああ、なるほど。
Yeah,
あ、
yeah.
でもこれが一番危ないんですよ。
This is the most important, most dangerous thing.
途中でロードマップをなくしてしまうと迷っちゃうんですよ。
Well, no, it's not like I don't have a map, it's just not the accent roadmap, you know, I've been studying using a few different methods, you know, Genki method, Japanese Pod 101,
はい。
AJAT method, all of those kind of things. So I'm just kind of seeing what's right for me at the moment. So, yeah.
はいはいはい。これら全部悪魔の学習法なんですよ。
Like literally all this says in Japanese is all of that is the devil's study methods.
これら全部、
Yeah, the one,
はい。
AJAT method, all of those kind of things. So I'm just kind of seeing what's right for me at the moment. So, yeah.
はいはいはい。これら全部、
See, there's nothing in there that literally says, I hate to be the one to tell you this. I mean, if you wanted, there are a couple of ways you could say that if you wanted to be very explicit about it. You could say, like, icha nan desu kedo. Which is like, or more colloquially, warui kedo, which is like, I'm sorry, but. But see, the way in Japanese, this I hate to be the one to tell you this, is the hemming and hawing, the これは全部悪魔の学習法なんですよ。
全部悪魔の学習法なんですよ。
Again, so in Japanese, you don't have to say, you sort of act out, you perform the reluctance, the regret that you have to be the one to break this to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my mum said as well, but I mean, the same thing, you know, could be said about you guys.
あ、でもよく言われるんですが、たま、
Give me a minute to refute that in English. Well, but in Japanese, it's just, it is said often, but...
小高、中高、小高、そして平板があって、
Devonte, no, Jagariko, wait for mommy, no, and get off the handrail, get off, dickhead.
とても可愛い子供ですね。
No, he's not. He's an idiot.
彼のことを考えてみませんか？
now, literally, that just means, would you think about him? What you think of him, essentially? I mean, again, this is what I love about this, is it is a good example. It's very natural Japanese. It's natural English, well translated, and not literal, and you get to actually see it. And if you're listening to the Japanese, and you're at a point in your, like, study of Japanese that you can actually kind of break down what you're hearing, and you see that next to the English, you can start to understand these equivalencies, the different ways that you would express these things in one versus the other. And this is just the best resource I can think of immediately on YouTube. The Power Japanese series, published by the Tuttle Publishers, it's on Amazon, also is very good with this. It's example sentences that are, at the very least, given an idiomatic translation. And sometimes also, I think in like the Particle book and a few other, the more basic ones, that are also broken down word for word, so you can see how these two things sort of line up. This is not a hard and fast thing where you have very specific rules. This is very much a vibe-based thing. And it's all about understanding the vibes, and this is why it is a thing that takes a long time, and why actually Japanese, a good Japanese English translator or a good English Japanese translator is somebody that actually they will often have taken way more time to develop that ability than, say, a good German English or good Spanish English translator, or vice versa. Because there is a lot more similarity in the way that these expressions are formed than there is between Japanese and English.
What do you...
間違った発音を覚えてしまう前に正しい知識を
Now, literally what that means is before he regrettably remembers the mistaken pronunciation, 間違った発音を覚える前に
与えてみませんか
Like, he's not even...
前に正しい知識を与えてみませんか
like the good word. See, you wouldn't say the good word like いい言葉 literally in Japanese, because that is specifically out of like Christian apologetics, and most people have no experience with Christian apologetics, so it doesn't mean anything. But like 正しい知識 is how it's translated, how it's said in Japanese, which means correct knowledge.
Like, he's not even my kid. I'm just trying to smash his mom, to be honest.
重いじゃなくて重い、そして赤いじゃなくて赤い。
いやでも赤いっていう人はたくさんいますよね。
まあいますが間違ってますので。
Yeah. See, and this node as well, must node. This is a very common way of speaking when you're being formal and polite. You'll hear this a lot in like train and airport announcements and things like that. And it also serves the purpose that node, in this case, for example, it's what they're doing here is it sort of implies the conclusion. It says, because they're all wrong, meaning, because and the implication, of course, is, you shouldn't listen to them. But you don't say that explicitly, you just say, 間違っていますので.
Bro, let me level with you real quick.
はい。
なんかこんなにたくさんのルールを守らなきゃいけないと思うと、なんか息苦しくない？
Okay. And now this is like, literally that means, thinking about the fact that you have to keep all these rules, mamoru, which literally means like to protect or defend, but it also means like to keep a promise, to keep, follow rules. ルールを守る is to follow the rules. So when you think about having to follow all these rules, doesn't it become 息苦しくない Iki as in breath, 苦しい which means painful, you're suffering. 息苦しい is like it's painful, it's hard to breathe. You're suffering when you try to breathe. And when you combine all that, it means like, don't you find these rules suffocating?
まあもちろんそういう時もありますが、これが正しい道だと分かっていますので。
だって例外と矛盾が多いんですよね。
Yeah, see, and there's no aren't you ever bothered in the Japanese, which it's just, but wouldn't you, it's like that ですよね, it's like, wouldn't you say there are a lot of exceptions and contradictions? And you sort of imply that this is something that should be concerning. Again, this is like, there are a lot of ways to develop it. The way I kind of developed the ability to speak more naturally in Japanese and to translate more naturally from Japanese into English and vice versa was just looking at other people's work who did it right. And this is a good example of doing it right.
Pitch accent works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. So, if you want to learn that sort of... his stuff on pitch accent is amazing. His stuff on pronunciation in general is amazing. I have to say, he explicitly teaches a lot of stuff that nobody ever told me anything about. Even in the situations, a lot of the time I didn't actually have a proper Japanese teacher. And most of the time I'm just teaching myself. But when I have had people teaching me Japanese a long time ago when I was first starting out, the only things people really told me about to worry about with the pronunciation were things like knowing that there's certain vowels that get devoiced, they get silenced, like that I in mashita nobody says mashita unless they're like just trying to be cute and spelling it out for you. It's mashita. That at the end of mas. Or des, they tell you that, and the importance of short versus long vowels and stuff like that. But he gets into stuff that you don't really hear about. Like there's a difference in tongue placement between the pronunciation of the T in Japanese and English, and things like that. Nobody tells you about that in my experience. They tell you actually those things you don't really have to worry about. They're basically the same. And the key word there is basically. They are different, and it's been interesting watching those particularly because I sort of, I check myself there because I've never thought about, deliberately forming these things. I just kind of, I have developed a pronunciation largely from being exposed to a lot of spoken Japanese in a lot of contexts, and so, なんとなくそうなっちゃっただけなの。This is it's just kind of happened that way, and so it's interesting to sort of test out, am I putting my tongue in the place where it is conventional to put your tongue in Japanese, even though I've never been taught it? And the answer is actually, it turns out, yes. There are more than one, but it is useful to kind of have this stuff pointed out explicitly. You can be aware of it. I think that's useful. Like, nobody told me a thing about pitch accent. What they told me in school, in textbooks and stuff like that, was Japanese doesn't do stress, and that much it was clear that wasn't true, because you could definitely tell listening to Japanese that certain syllables are more prominent than others. But what they meant really was they don't do stress the way we do in English and a lot of other languages, which is, see, what we do for the most part is we take a syllable, and if it's stressed, we say it a bit louder a lot of the time. In Japanese, they don't do that. It isn't, what they do is they say it with a higher pitch. But it registers kind of the same way. Because it's just a more prominent syllable, and if you're used to the sort of stress patterns, the sort of method of stressing syllables that exists in English or Spanish or Italian or something like that. Although there are variants of Spanish that actually do pitch accent. Chilean Spanish, for example, which is the variant that I'm most at home with, actually has pitch accent. It's one of the many things that make it sound very different to Spanish and the rest of the Spanish-speaking world. But, this is one of the things you can sort of train yourself to hear it. But he goes into a huge amount of detail on it, and so that already is great. I mean, but these comedy videos are a great way. And other things where you have a good translation, regrettably, I cannot say that this is reliably the case when you look at Netflix, I should note. They don't necessarily have good translations at all. Some of their translations are terrible. Next, a good professional idiomatic translation next to a Japanese phrase that is also, natural and idiomatic, you can gradually develop a feel for this vibe-based glossing that you have to learn to do to translate, and also that will make your Japanese sound more natural, because because what you're seeing in these translations fundamentally is, this is how it sounds. This is how it sounds to the person who's hearing it. To a Japanese speaker. This is how it comes off. As opposed, and what it means literally, and you have how it comes off, and you can start to develop an understanding of the difference between these things. And so this is something I highly recommend. So that's like the best piece of advice on learning Japanese that nobody ever gave me, but I've sort of figured out on my own anyway. And now you have it as well. And I'm gonna clip this and maybe try to fix some of these camera fuck-ups somehow, and put this in VOD on the YouTube channel at some point in the next week or so.